Hi everyone. To mark World Mental Health Day 2019, I'm going to talk about an issue that has affected me for many years: loneliness. I feel lonely quite frequently. There you go. I've said it out aloud and in front of you all. But hey, that doesn't mean I'm a weirdo, a social recluse, or a Billy No Mates. Sadly, loneliness is often stigmatised, meaning people like me would rather chew on glass than tell others that they feel alone. But denying loneliness will only perpetuate the problem. That has certainly been the case for me. The more I buried my head in the sand, the worse the loneliness got, and in turn resulted in me suffering from significant bouts of anxiety as I hated my own company. And whenever I was on my own, I would let my imagination run away with itself. So, how can someone who is frequently compared to a social butterfly ever feel lonely? You might be asking yourselves. Well, it goes back to when I first became self employed. Granted, I loved the freedom and the flexibility that came with being my own boss. After all, I called the shots. I chose who to work for, which projects to work on, where to work from, how to work, and how often. But it didn't take long as I spent days on end on my own in front of a computer to desperately miss my former colleagues. I yearned the office banter, the camaraderie, and even something as simple as having a colleague to bounce ideas off. Outside of work, things were not much better either. As my friends drifted off to start their families, the invites started dwindling and eventually got to a point where my social calendar looked pretty empty. I felt really low and thankfully realised that something needed to change radically. Otherwise, I would allow loneliness and anxiety resulting in depression and God knows what else. The light bulb moment for me came about when I was holidaying in Ireland. I was travelling around Donegal with my husband, and we were staying in a bed and breakfast. In the guest lounge, I got chatting to another traveller who was on her own, having lost her husband earlier that year. I said to her that I could never go travelling on my own, and she asked me why. And my response was, well, because I hate my own company. I dread being on my own, so I can't imagine anything worse. And she advised me that learning to love my company and to feel comfortable being on my own was really important. In fact, it was a bit of a survival technique, if I remember correctly, because her view was that although at the moment I have plenty of people around me who can offer love, support, advice, etc., nobody knows what's around the corner. And when, like her, someone I love could be whisked away from me. So, leaving Ireland, I felt empowered and energised, and quickly came up with a plan to figure out how I would be able to spend more time on my own and not feel lonely or anxious. So I came up with a list of activities that I could do on my own, such as cooking, gardening, arts and crafts, all of which I really enjoy. I even managed to get to the cinema on my own, which is a massive breakthrough for me because I couldn't imagine anything worse. So, what other coping strategies have I used successfully? Firstly, it's really important to not neglect those friends that I did unfortunately lose contact with. So rather than hiding behind social media, I decided to go a step further and actually contact people and make engagements, make appointments to meet with them. Secondly, I found that getting a pet also helped. So we got a cat called Daisy. So it meant when I was working from home, I was no longer on my own. I also find that random acts of kindness have been a great help. That means talking to someone on the train and asking them how their day's going. Finally, I found that talking about it and acknowledging that there was a problem was also significantly important. Because if you keep things to yourself, people may not realise that there's an issue. Anyway, hopefully you'll feel inspired by my story and you too will learn to love yourself and come up with your own plan of how you could potentially deal with loneliness or any other mental health issues that you could be suffering from. Thank you for listening.